Councils. Please, Paula.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. What a terrific panel, and the focus on the report and the collaboration between the Atlantic Council and GLOBSEC, I think, is terrific. And in fact, the entire morning has just been absolutely terrific. Now, tomorrow, let me give you a little bit of a preview. We look forward to continuing these conversations. And at that time, we're going to be welcoming to the stage the current Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Ambassador Phil Rieker. We will also have a town hall meeting with the Polish Foreign Minister, Czaputowicz, the Hungarian Foreign Minister, Szijjártó, the Czech Deputy Foreign Minister, Schmiles, among others. And then we'll also be having a closed session, or should I say not closed, but closing session, with the Slovak Foreign Minister and OSCE Chairman, Chairman in Office, Miroslav Lajčák. But this evening, we still have a very important agenda to fulfill. So over to Damon.
Thank you, Paula. We've gathered to mark the milestone anniversaries which made Europe whole and free possible. But we've also made the case, and you've heard in the conversations, that we cannot take Europe whole and free with Central Europe as an integral part of it. We can't take that for granted. And we understand that that's why the Council's work, what we've been talking about, is about the future. How to build the ties and develop a meaningful agenda for the next decade, the next century, a century in which we hope this idea of a permanent alliance with these nations provides the kind of anchor of stability and security, so the region is an important partner of the United States globally. And then I would say, for us to close out this evening, I'd hearken back to what our chairman, Executive Chairman Emeritus General Jones tells us, that vision without resources is hallucination. And so this evening, we're particularly delighted to announce the launch, as some of you may have noticed, of the Weiser Family Distinguished Fellowship to help anchor the Council's work on Central Europe. This fellowship and the programming on it about Central Europe it supports is made possible from the very generous and significant gift from Ambassador Ronald Weiser and his wife, Eileen. Thank you very much, Ron. Ron is with us tonight, and I want to thank you. Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know Ambassador Weiser, Ron's a pretty remarkable individual who served as U.S. Ambassador to the Slovak Republic at a critical time. He was founder of McKinley, a national real estate management company. He's on the chairman of the board of the Regents at the University of Michigan, a place that is passionate to his heart. And now I'm delighted to say a member of the board of directors of the Atlantic Council. We really appreciate you being with us, Ron.
Ron, I'd also like to, on behalf of the board of the Atlantic Council, also thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We are just extremely grateful for your support, your leadership in a region which is very central to this institution. So really, thank you for your many contributions and for your generosity. Let's give him another thank you. But we're not quite done yet, because before we have you come forward, let us at least discuss what is the result of your generosity. This evening, we're very delighted to be announcing that Ambassador Dan Fried, former Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, former Special Assistant to the President, and former Ambassador to Poland, he will hold the inaugural Weiser Family Distinguished Fellowship at the Atlantic Council. I'd like to say Dan is a very long-time friend and colleague and extremely well-deserving of this fellowship. He and I actually first met in the Reagan administration. He was Polish desk officer and I was working on Central Eastern Europe at the Reagan NSC. And I have to say, I was always impressed by Dan's passion for the region, your deep knowledge, and also your extensive context. The fact of it is, Dan knew everyone and everyone knew Dan. So I want to congratulate you, Dan, but I'm not quite done yet. We heard from Dan earlier, and we know that he's a national asset, and the Council is very lucky to have you on our team. We can really think of no one better who has done more to advance the cause of freedom, security, and prosperity of Central Europe and to bolster the region in an alliance with the United States than Dan Fried. clearly, your long-standing work in this area, I'd use the term, is non-pareil. We're fortunate to have his extraordinary talent here. And I have one last to share of there are many vignettes to share with Dan Fried, but we have very little time. But this one I do want to mention because it undergirds the spirit of what we are here today about. One of the most memorable moments for me was when you were awarded by Polish Foreign Minister Bronisław Geremek a Medal of Honor, and for your very long-standing work on bringing Poland into NATO. So, historic indeed, and Dan, just congratulations to you. Damon.
Thank you, Paula. This is a special moment for me, not just because I'm a manager or leader at the Atlantic Council, delighted to have the resources to be able to do more important work on Central Europe, but it's also because I had the chance to work very closely with both of these individuals. And I've seen how they've helped make the world a better place through their ideas, their actions, their values, and a sense of relentless determination, if you know either of them. I had the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to work with Dan Fried at the National Security Council on his team, and I learned so much from Dan about Europe, about Central Europe, but I also learned just the practicalities of being able not just to have a vision, but how to translate that vision into strategy, into policies that would deliver results, and in this case, delivered a result of securing freedom, enlarging our alliance, and anchoring all of Central Europe within NATO and the EU. Dan truly was an architect of the concept of a Europe whole and free. But at the same time, I was able, when I worked at the NSC, I had the opportunity to watch Ambassador Ron Weiser in action out in the field as he served as U.S. Ambassador to Slovakia. And I watched you masterfully advance U.S. interests in the country, ensuring that a country that had missed the first opportunity to join the alliance, that it sure as heck wasn't going to miss the second opportunity to join the alliance. And in fact, with your support, was at the head of the pack when we came to that round of enlargement. And I watched how Ron really distinguished himself as an ambassador in the field, bringing a sense of creativity to policy, charm, and ability to build extremely close relationships with people that mattered at key moments, and a relentless focus on getting the job done, producing results. So we are so honored to have a fellowship named at the Atlantic Council in honor of your family. I want to invite you to the stage. Paula and I would love to invite you to the stage to say a few words to help close us out this evening. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Paula. Thank you.
Well, you can see how they welcome me. This is my reserve, Mr. Wilson here. And you can see that I well prepared my notes as I was sitting on my reserve seat of Mr. Wilson. So I can't tell you how honored I am to have Dan Fried as the first fellow of this fellowship that we've set up. Because Dan, it was your instructions to me before I left that helped me form the strategies that we used with in our embassy. And I noticed that my two former deputy DCMs are here today too. And as they know, when I got there, I didn't know very much, but I did know about strategy, tactics, and keeping them safe and making sure that we went in the right direction. But I was asked by Damon to say a few words of why I care about Central Europe. I have a tie to Central Europe. When I didn't know I was going to Central Europe, I was asked by the president to take what he considered a very difficult job when I was asked to serve, and as it happens, it wasn't Slovakia, it was Romania. And for a variety of reasons, they decided to change about 6 months in and gave me some choices, and Slovakia was a great opportunity, I felt, to help change a different path, because as Dan said, without them sharing the same values as we do, because NATO is a alliance of shared values, that if the old authoritarian prime minister took power, that it would be very difficult for us to support their entry into NATO, and told me to figure out the strategy to make sure that we had a continuing democratic government in Slovakia. So I went out and visited all 138 cities in Slovakia and delivered the message. I remember Dan talking about, and I think the ambassador talking about message, and I found it to be most valuable talking directly to the people rather than being a talking head from Slovakia, from Bratislava, and that was a real opportunity to meet and know what Slovakia was, and it it was quite an extraordinary place. In all 138 cities, there were different kinds of people. There were different parties in control. And if you've ever traveled Slovakia, getting to those cities is not an easy thing. Remember bumping around a lot of bumpy roads in those days. At any rate, I was able to deliver the message of the importance of this country, of Slovakia, maintaining the shared values of NATO and the importance of NATO. And with our friends in the EU, I was able to say, look, it's the same people, and if you don't get into NATO, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to get into the EU. And we were able to get them to understand the importance of being in NATO at that time, and because there was not universal support for entry into NATO, either among the parliament or the people of Slovakia. So that was able to change. And I learned the importance of diplomacy at that time, and that's why I'm so thrilled to be involved with the Atlantic Council. As a regent at the University of Michigan, and as they mentioned, now the chairman of the board of the Regents, I was able to help found something there called the Weiser Center for Diplomacy, which will be the only center that will be at the Ford School that will be focused on diplomacy in the Midwest. As you know, there's East Coast and West Coast focus on that, but I'm really proud that we'll be able to focus on bringing some of the young people from the University of Michigan into the diplomatic world, because it's such an important world. And I just wanted to tell you something that I say quite often when I'm at the University of Michigan, when I'm talking to people, is these shared values, it may not be democracy as we define it in the Bill of Rights in the United States, but it's freedom that everybody shares, and that drive is universal. And the freedoms that I find to be the most universal are the drive for a better life for yourself and your family, and the second, the freedom from fear from your government, the police, and your neighbors. And those are things that are now well ingrained in Slovakia and all of Central Europe, and that's why I think they're so important to the United States. And this council, I think, and all these people that are here, you can help spread that message as I did, and that's going to make a difference, I believe, in understanding among the American people and the people of Central Europe, understanding the importance of the alliance between the United States and Central Europe. I think it's an important alliance for the future, and Central Europe is really the bulwark against the expansion of totalitarianism in the future. I found that fear there when I first arrived in 2001. So yeah, just after 9/11, they were very frightened of what could happen, and I think that's something that they now don't have that fear of, but they do again, and they didn't have it for a long time, and they do again. And whatever we can do to take that fear away is an important job for all of us. So I thank you for letting me say a few words, and I'm really proud to be involved with this center, and thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to have you stay here just for 1 second. I'm going to ask Paula to rejoin me, Ambassador Fried come up, and if you could pick up this underneath the red there. I just want to present to Dan Fried and congratulate our first inaugural Weiser Fellow Family Fellowship. Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with the ministers. Really appreciate your time and your engagement through the evening. Thank you.